Hi, everybody. My name is Maureen Manjoro. Thank you so much for tuning in to our channel. And thank you for joining us for the first episode of Career Challenge series. And today I'm going to be joined by Dr. Orin Davis, who's going to be talking about basically how to choose a career 101, and also why other people make it in the workplace and others don't. Remember, after your studies and so forth, you are bound to go either into the workforce, be an entrepreneur, start something of your own.
Orin Davis. I'm a positive psychologist, and I do research on creativity, flow, and mentoring. And I basically help companies develop their human capital. So I also work as a consultant. A lot of what I do is help companies do better hiring. Hiring is a tricky thing, and it's also one of the most important things that people can do in their companies. And so a lot of what I'm doing is I'm helping them develop their strategy, go through the actual processes of hiring and diversity, equity, inclusion, making sure that people, once they're put in a job, that they've got a good environment, a good culture, and that they've got good management processes so that they absolutely love their job. Yeah, because a lot of it really is about making sure that the job and the person fit well together. So funnily enough, a lot of what I also do is career coaching. So being a university professor, I coach my students, but I also have professional clients at all levels, all the way from, let's say, just getting out of school, all the way up to executive. Well, I think one of the things that always interested me was career selection, college selection, just how the right people end up in the right place. And that always got me because, as I watched the whole college competition thing in the United States, colleges can be extremely competitive. And I watched a lot of interesting situations as these sorts of the college admissions game sorted itself out. And what I saw, sometimes it made sense, sometimes it really didn't. And there was a lot of discussion about, what the selection process was like. And that was one of the things that got me very interested in selection processes. Who gets into a college? Who doesn't? Why? And then later on, school, jobs. And jobs turned out to be the most interesting of all to me, although I still do some work in college admissions and education and consulting and things like that. Jobs are like the real interesting thing. How do people find the right job? How do people know what career they're going to go into? How do they, once they've decided what career they're going to go into, how do they find the right people to work with, the right job, the right task? How do they fit that with themselves, into their narrative and their passions and their identity? Because for a lot of people, a job can be more than just a job. It can be the career. It could be a calling. And that's something way more than just, where you put in 8 hours every day. So I think when people go to college, sometimes they know what they're going to do and sometimes they don't. And I can tell you, I switched, and people are always shocked to discover that I'm an ex-chemist, that I actually started university chemistry major and was really passionate about chemistry, thought it was really awesome. By the way, I still do. But I ended up getting sucked in by the neuroscience department. So I think a lot of it is really about having an open mind and really thinking about what the possibilities are. And one of the things that I like about universities, especially in the United States, is that a lot of them have what we call distribution requirements, where you've got to take a class in several different types of subjects. So, for example, I went to Brandeis University. And how long ago? I started college about 20 years ago. But back then, there was still a wide range of courses that you need to take. You need to take a quantitative course, a science course, the humanities, the social science. You had to take an arts class. You had to take physical education, and you also had to take something called a non-Western course. So you had to take something that covered cultures or societies that were not in the Western world at all. And that was a requirement even 20 years ago at Brandeis. It was a bit different. Not everybody has to do that, but we did. And just going through those classes, part of the point was to give you the opportunity to see something that might be interesting and to go for it and to just try it out. And always we were advised, and I've consistently advised people in like fashion, go through the course catalog, see what's there, what looks like it just might be fun to take, and just go take it. It might be surprising and cool and might inspire you in any number of ways, maybe not even in the ways that you expect. Probably a famous example of this is what people don't know is one of the reasons why Microsoft Word has so many different fonts, and why many word processing programs have so many different fonts is Steve Jobs studied calligraphy. So when he was creating word processors, he really was thinking about how the letters look.
Oh.
And so and that was an inspiration, something he did in college, and that led to why all the word processing programs use different fonts.
We all agree that some people make it in the workplace and others don't. It's really difficult in that way, because somebody is 10 years old at the workplace but doesn't really get the hang of it, or probably they end up dreading going to work. And another person is there 1 year down the line, they are, oh my God, thriving, and it's exciting for them, and they're doing things you never thought that could be done. So how do you do that?
So I think a lot of it has to do with making sure you've got the right job person fit. And that has very little to do with your college major, which, by the way, is something I've been screaming at companies at for years now. Stop worrying about who got what college major. Either they got the skill set you need or they don't have the skill set you need. Worry about the skill set. But besides that, is making sure that you've got a good relationship with your manager, and that you've got a good manager, and that you've got a job where you get challenged and where you get the opportunity to grow in interesting ways. And those factors have very little to do with a specific job, or like a job title or a company, and more to do with the opportunities that are created for you and that you are in a position to create for yourself within the limited microcosm in which you find yourself. So there are a number of different factors that go into that. One of those is, a question you asked, which really struck me there is, what if you're just staying for the money? So I want to point out that we use our jobs two different ways. For some of us, a job is a career, it's a calling, it's part of how we make a contribution to the world. For others of us, however, a job is what funds our contribution to the world. So I'll give you an example. A field that's very hard to make it into as a full-time job right away is music, right? A lot of musicians are not able to make their music and get paid for it on a full-time basis. So what a lot of them do is they work a day job, and that day job funds their ability to make music, to make the art, and to help distribute it. And so for those people, as long as you can manage the job, it's working okay and it's not driving you nuts, stay with the job, stay with the money, work your way up, because that's not your main line anyway. And you know what? I think companies should be comfortable with that. That's okay. Not always does it have to be your main line. But for other people, I would say, by the way, especially your first job, make it at least a year. Two is better, but at least a year in your first job, if possible, like if you're not having a really, really bad time. But, after that, first of all, if it's not a good fit, how did you get that job in the first place? But if it's a good fit, or at least if it's a decent fit, or factors that you couldn't have predicted lead you to discover that it wasn't a good fit, that's where you start having conversations with your boss, with the company. What do you need? See what you can get to make the job what you need it to be. If that's not working out, yeah, it may be time to look elsewhere for the growth opportunities and the challenges and the meaning that makes it work. And don't get me wrong, we'll all take the wrong job, sometimes. And that happens. It certainly happened to me. And I can think of one job I took where literally the second day of work, I'm not kidding, day number 2, I started looking for another job because I knew. It turns out I hadn't met my boss. I thought I did during the interview process, but I hadn't. And as soon as I met my boss, I knew. I knew I was not going to get along with this person, and I knew that it was going to be oil and water, and I knew that basically from the minute I met my boss, it was a race. Will I quit first or will I get fired first? But one of those two is definitely happening because my boss hates me.
Top things that one should consider, or at least then stay for, that are worth staying for on a job, and those that are worth.
I think I got your question. What I would say is you got to think about a couple different factors. One is the money, of course. One is the job, like the actual job itself, like, you know, the time commitment, the effort commitment. Is it what you sign up for? But then also, I think that the interpersonal relationships are one of the most important things that you consider, and also job control. The extent to which you have control over when you do your job, how you do your job, the resources you have available for doing your job, and whether you can choose them, and whether you get along with the people around you. Those two things, the job control and the relationships with the people, those are the two where if those are not good, get out of there. Because bad relationships with people is going to torpedo your career, that they can mess you up 16 ways from Sunday. And when you don't have the ability to control your job to the extent that you need, now listen, when you're a rookie, you're not going to have much job control. But you know, as you get more advanced, you do get more, and you do get more votes and decisions about how you do your work and when you do your work. And if you're not feeling like you get that vote, or if you're not getting that level of control over your own autonomy, like you don't get your own autonomy on the job, that's a really big red flag and should tell you that it might be time to go. But in other cases, things like money, growth, perks, and perks can be things like even just access. I think about one job I had where, you know, one of the perks was that it was at a university, and being a university employee, I had full access to the library. And that was huge. It meant that, like, you know, one of the perks of my job was that I had access to one of the top libraries in the region, and I could go into the library. I could do whatever I wanted. I could read what I wanted. I could get what I wanted. And that was amazing. And a couple of times I actually, like, you know, would go over and use that privilege because I was a university employee. There are a couple different ways to do it. And the first thing is, since you said that we're talking to a wide range of people, there is absolutely nothing wrong with changing careers. Adults do it, like mid-age adults do it all the time. And what's amazing about it is that you see that their experiences from their first career end up being incredible inspirations in the second. They've learned a few things, more than a few things. And by getting that interdisciplinary perspective, you see some amazing stuff happen. And for some people, they can even make career changes that are based on their life circumstances. I'll give you an example. Somebody I know who, you know, very unfortunately, I found out passed away yesterday. Really, really amazing guy. But part of it was he was a university professor for 30 years. Then he watched his wife die of cancer. And that inspired him to become a social worker. And so after, you know, years and years at the university, he just, as an older gentleman, probably 50s, 60s, dropped his career, went back to school to study social work, and became a social worker, and was starting to help people that were going through situations like the one that he'd been through. He decided he wanted to learn how to formally help people with this. And so that's what he did. And it was really incredible. And I think he made a great difference to many, many people in the community and in the, you know, the greater metropolitan area. And I thought that was really something great. And you see this happen a lot. People who have gone from one career to another. But, you know, having been a professor, I think for what it helped him is that he was really good at explaining things and articulating things. And, you know, when you go into social work, often what you need to be able to do is help people articulate their situation. And that skill, that core skill, he used to transfer over from one area to another. And we call this transferable skills. And this transferable skill is something he had. And I can tell you that from studying chemistry, going from chemistry to psychology, one of the things that you really have to do in chemistry is think about systems and mechanisms. And I got trained on thinking through systems and mechanisms. That turned out to be very handy when I became a psychologist. And in my TEDx talk, which you know, people have been watching, funnily enough, I very heavily borrow on my chemistry background. I actually put a reaction coordinate up on the screen to make a point about behavior change. And we have that happen all the time. So I think the most important thing, and I've been saying this about college, I've been saying this about your career, is be open to serendipity. Because it can happen a lot that you've got an experience, some random experience that happens that will change the way things are going for you. Part of what, for example, when I was in college, part of what got me sucked into the neuroscience department from the chemistry department was a random guest lecturer. I was taking a course. Somebody from the neuroscience department came in, gave a guest lecture. I thought he was an incredible guy, really wanted to work with him, thought he knew a lot, thought he was fun. And I did. I went and worked for him for several years, but that's how I became a neuroscience major, was this random guest lecture. And just to be open to those moments in the workplace. I mean, part of what led me to becoming a human capital consultant was some of the experiences that I had on the job, and some of the experiences that I had, watching college admissions, was I realized that selection processes need a lot of work. And that random thing, for example, the job I told you about, where like the instant I met my boss, who I thought I'd met in my, in the interview process, but I hadn't. And it's like, that person would never have hired me if they'd met me during the interview process, but they were sick the day I interviewed, and then these sorts of random things happen. And so then, and I didn't realize that the person who was out sick was my actual boss, and the person I thought was my boss was somebody else. That person I got along with just fine. But like, these kinds of things happen. And I've also found that in some cases, job descriptions, interviews, they're all done somewhat mediocre. I almost say very badly, but they're pretty mediocre. Some job descriptions are really bad. So you read a job description, you have no idea what the company is like. And one of the most important things, and really, I hope your viewers are really thinking about this carefully, is that when you're on a job interview, remember this very well, you're interviewing them as hard as they're interviewing you. And I have found again and again that employers are missing this. The people sitting across from you in that interviewee seat, they're interviewing you too. And they're checking you out, and they want to see how you behave. And if you act inappropriately during that interview, they're going to walk out. And I've walked out of interviews, and I encourage people, if they're being jerks, walk out. They obviously don't want to have you as an employee. And if they're being and I've seen this like disrespect, even, and I've actually seen this, like, people come to me with this, how do I deal with this situation? Sexual harassment during an interview. It's unbelievable. And I've gotten asked about this. What do you do if you're in the middle of an interview and the interviewer is actually saying things that are completely inappropriate? I'm like, walk out, number one, and number two, stop by the head of HR's office on the way out. That's something to think about, is report that to the head of HR. And yeah, that's really bad. And I've seen situations I've been in where I find that an interviewer just isn't being polite, or seems to think that they can ask me questions that they don't have to answer, or that I don't need to answer, something along those lines. It's just really odd questions sometimes. And I'm like, and I believe it or not, I've actually gotten asked during an interview, which in the US is illegal, whether I'm married. That's an illegal question. And at one point, I actually once had a female interviewer ask me, am I married? I'm like, what? I really don't want to talk about this. So these kinds of things, that definitely left me with a very awkward feeling. And I'm pretty sure she was not asking for personal reasons, but it was still just a very awkward moment. And and as you can see, it's something I remembered. This interview was a long, long time ago, but you remember stuff like that. And you also should be asking the company questions. Your interviewers, ask them questions about themselves. They're asking about you, ask about them. They want to know about your character, well, ask about theirs, because you have to work for them, and these people are going to be in a position of power relative to you. Choose carefully. And if you believe in your abilities and your talent, then trust the fact that if you're good enough to get an interview one place, good enough to get a job in one place, you're good enough to get a job in another place. Recognize your own value on this. That's really important. So in some cases, a break is actually necessary. And I'm sorry, the Zoom cut out, but hopefully I caught your question as to, whether you always need to be in the workplace and you always need to have a job. So my answer to that is an emphatic no, especially after you've been working a job for a long time. You're going to be starting a new job in the future. Just to take a break in between, step back, take a break. And I always advise between two jobs, if it's at all possible, give yourself a week or two. Just spend some time, take a deep breath. That's okay. So give yourself that opportunity to just spend a week or two, catch your breath, take a little vacation. We always need that time off to engage in recreation, to rest, to just to reinvigorate ourselves and our identities. And in some cases, I've seen people take much longer off. And if you can, that's not necessarily a bad idea to step back, take a few months, especially for some people, they need to put their lives together, or there's something happening in their lives. Let's say if they've got to, take care of a relative, or if they've got a major life change, they are finding a spouse, or they're moving, or they need to rethink some things about their career, maybe even get some training or take some online classes. That's legit to step back, take time, and redesign who you're going to be. That's totally acceptable.
Tell us maybe something interesting about you and to our viewers, because they've heard a lot of it today. I'm very sure people are then going to know what to do in the workplace and probably the reasons why they're not making it in their workplace. And if it's time to move on, find something, take a break and find yourself. I think we all got that now, how to do it sometimes without having to pay for it. So probably tell us something interesting about yourself and probably something that you want some people to remember or think about as they choose and go on with their daily lives, 9-to-5 jobs, entrepreneurship routes, and all that.
Sure. So I'll tell you something interesting. One of my hobbies is actually ballroom dance. And it's something I learned from my grandparents. They taught me how to ballroom dance originally. And it became a very serious hobby of mine. Obviously, during this pandemic, I've had a little bit less of it to do. But it's something I really love. And one of the things that I found from this hobby is I've learned a lot of things that are applicable to my job. And I mean, that's generally true in hobbies. We develop certain skills, we develop certain abilities, intuitions, and it can also be an outlet. But dance, especially ballroom dance, there's a lot about partnership, working with a partner, creating with a partner. And just my experiences have taught me a lot about partnership, and it's provided a lot of inspiration for me. It's also been a great creative outlet and just a heck of a lot of fun. It's allowed me to discover sides of myself that I didn't necessarily articulate as well in the workplace. But once I found them, I was actually able to bring them back and forth. And it helped me to develop my own personal complexity and, to grow in any number of ways and have a heck of a lot of fun doing it. So I always recommend people have a hobby. It's a good thing to do. And it helps us create ourselves and develop in a number of fun ways.
Thank you so much, Dr. Orin Davis.